Chris Jericho is heading back to WWE. That is happening. I don't see a world right now, given where he is and where All Elite Wrestling is, where he returns to AEW. Jericho has been a part of AEW ever since its inception, ever since that first ever press conference back in the beginning of 2019. And for the first 3 years of the company's existence, you could argue that there was no bigger, impactful star in that time than Chris Jericho. And by that, I mean Jericho did something that no one else who is a part of the inception of AEW was able to do, and that was validate the company in the eyes of casual wrestling fans and the broader public. People knew that Chris Jericho was a massive star. People knew that Chris Jericho was in the midst of a career renaissance. People knew the name, they knew the brand, they knew what he could bring, and in turn, that helped bring extra eyeballs, extra attention to AEW when it first started, and that's why it was so important for him to be the first ever All Elite Wrestling World Champion. Chris Jericho helped set the tone for the company. But as the years went on, I think it's been proven that AEW and Chris Jericho just outgrew each other. And it all began back in 2022. Jericho, someone who was known for reinventing himself, for absolutely changing the game time and time again, from Y2J to the Painmaker to Le Champion to the Wizard. Jericho is able to absolutely change himself in a way that not many wrestlers have in order to stay relevant. But unfortunately for Chris Jericho, beginning in the latter part of 2022, everything that brought him to the table, his ability to pop quarter hours, his ability to bring attention to the product, his ability to change and reinvent himself, was no longer the case. Jericho, at the latter end of 2022, was the ROH World Champion. And the reason for him being the champion at the time was not just because they wanted Jericho to walk around and call himself the Ocho. It was because Tony Khan and ROH thought that Jericho, who had up until that point been a massive draw and had still been a huge catalyst for the company, was going to be the person to help them get an ROH TV deal. And the truth is that no deal has ever materialized. There has been talk of a potential deal, but Warner Brothers Discovery, a network that has been very close to AEW over the past couple of years, has never pulled the trigger on it. And the truth is, if Jericho was not going to be the reason for it, then at that point nothing was. And that was the excuse you heard at the time, that it was less because of Chris Jericho and more because of ROH being a dead brand. And I understand that, but I think this is when we saw the cracks in the Jericho vortex, as it were, begin to show, because this was the first time in AEW where Jericho had really done something that had failed on an epic scale. The intention was to get a TV deal. The intention was to put people over. The intention was to get more eyeballs on ROH, but Jericho failed to move the needle on any of that. And as we went into 2023, the Jericho Appreciation Society, which once was a pretty cool stable that brought out the charisma of the likes of Daddy Magic, Cool Hand Ange, and others, was a relic of itself and was just no longer relevant. And when the stable broke up, it felt like Jericho was on his decline in AEW. He was coming off of a pretty bad feud with Adam Cole. While he was able to do that thing with Will Ospreay going into the first ever Wembley show, Jericho's presence on TV in the latter part of 2023 began to feel more so like a burden. And that is when we got the horrible Golden Jet stuff with himself and Kenny Omega, a match which on paper felt like it should have worked. Two of Canada's favorite sons, two of the best pro wrestlers of all time, teaming up and going out there trying to have good matches and winning the tag team titles. That should have worked. And even though Kenny Omega's injury obviously put an end to it, there's a reason why they have not gone back to that stable. They have not gone back to that tag team. They have not gone back to that pairing. And it's because it didn't move the needle. Then in 2024, we saw Jericho and the Learning Tree, an experiment that we all should have seen as a failure from the get-go. And it was nauseous to watch at times. It was go away heat from the start. You would hear that new Chris Jericho music, which was not the iconic Judas song that everyone had become accustomed to, that everyone had fallen in love with, that had tens of thousands of people singing it every time Jericho would come out. Instead, it was some random Fozzy song that nobody knew, that had no mystique. And the unfortunate part is, up until that point, that was all that was really left of Jericho and his quote-unquote aura in AEW. And the Learning Tree stuff went the way it did. It was just not good. And I think coming off of the past 3 years, it's clear Jericho has failed to move the needle in an impactful way. He is not holding up quarter hours as he once did, and he is just not relevant in AEW as he once did. And combine that with the fact that there is a star-studded roster waiting in the wings. I don't think that Chris Jericho right now should be and will be a priority for AEW. Tony Khan has a decision to make when Jericho's contract is up at the end of 2025, and I think that decision has in a lot of ways been made for him. He has no incentive really to keep Chris Jericho other than keeping him away from WWE. And when we're talking about WWE, the likelihood is he will come back at the Royal Rumble. He will have a massive, massive return. People are going to be talking about it. It will be one of the top trends on Twitter, the top trends on social media in general. And then a couple of months later, he's probably going to be teaming with Jey Uso, calling themselves Y2J. He's probably going to be teaming with the likes of the New Day, Y2 New Day, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I think at that point, he's just going to be IP for WWE to sell merch with, to have cool backstage moments with, but not really do anything meaningful. And that is the future for Chris Jericho at this point. Do I think that AEW has the possibility of reviving his career one more time? Do I think Jericho has that in him? Maybe, but the past 3 years have failed to see that come to fruition, so why should I think that that is going to happen moving forward? In the end, though, I guess we'll see.